Thanks for staying with the festival to this point. Very nice to see you all. Don't be fooled, there's a long tradition in Edinburgh of very dry sessions deciding that they should put a swear word in the title to make them seem more interesting. This is not a case in point. This is a very exciting session, also with a swear word in the title. And we're going to be talking about startups. And I suppose two things to say at the top before I introduce the esteemed panel is, one is that you would have read broadcast over the last few months. I can see the editors there, and the editor maintains that there are, or has posed the question as to whether there are too many startups out there. It seems to be a bit of a fashion at the moment. Is there too much of it going on? But if you decide to take that leap, how should you do it? Is it the right thing to do? What form should it take? That's what we're going to be discussing today. And I don't know if any of you were in the Ben Frau session just now, but Ben sort of said, amongst other things, that he thought people who are willing to form their own company and suffer the slings and arrows and the rejection, the walls of rejection that comes day in, day out, he has nothing but admiration for. And so we're going to be discussing also about how you handle that, sailing alone in various different, in these companies, and how you keep yourself going and keep yourself motivated. So we have Pat Young, who is co-founder and MD of Sugar Films, and I'm just going to do a quick. Pat, you started off on your own without any backing, but now have Sky. You probably know this. I'm not telling you for the first time. Yeah, you have Sky. Sky is a minority, and Pat has been responsible for shows like Should I Marry My Cousin? I assume the answer was no, but we can find out about later. The Bill Cosby Fall of American Idol icon for BBC Two, amongst others. So welcome, Pat. Kate, you are fully owned by Fremantle. A small production company somewhere in London, and reviving Euston Films, which is an existing company, and you have a very exciting drama coming up with Neil Cross. Again, this is not news to you, but you're in the drama game. Jazz Gowans, who's CEO Creative. You have 3 titles. You are CEO Creative. You've done very well. Presumably you've given them all to yourself. So
just me.
CEO, Creative Director and Executive Producer at Transparent TV. You started off on your own, using your own money, and so that's the really sort of the hardcore end of it, but you sold out to Argonon and made millions and millions. Is this correct? No.
No comment.
More than I thought then. So you sold out to a big player, but went it alone. And then finally, Karen Smith, MD of Tuesday's Child. And Karen, you've gone to a different model. So you make entertainment shows and factual shows. Again, you know this. Pitch Battle, you're back in the room amongst others. And you went a model of being minority owned by Greenbird, which is what exactly?
We call it Hammock. It's not the most attractive of titles. Jamie and I used to shine together, and Stuart was his great friend. They're actually here today, so I'm having to be on my best behaviour about what I say about both of them. But
they back you and give you financial advice.
It's kind of slightly more complicated than
let's come to it in a second.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
So, but you're extremely welcome, Karen, however complicated your funding is. So that's the array. So different models, different ways of doing it. And before we get into the first, the first area, which is why these guys have decided to do it, what is it about them and how do they approach it, we're going to hear from people who have been interviewed. In other words, they haven't made the effort to come here, but they've been interviewed, say what they think about why they have done a startup. So we're just going to see a minute or so of VT, and then we're going to get stuck in. So if we can roll, I think it's called Why.
I had no choice other than to set up my own indie because nobody would employ me.
Because I didn't know what else to do, and I'm not sure anyone would employ me.
Because nobody would give me a job, and I had to work for myself.
Okay, the opportunity came about. I was 27 and I'd been working for ITV for a number of years. And then the opportunity to set up with 2 other people came about, and I just thought, I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. That sounds a bit wanky, doesn't it? But that was basically it.
I'd lost my job at the local radio station because they'd heard I was going to jump ship to TV, and the TV ship I wanted to jump to didn't want me anymore. I was a presenter, and they said I was getting too fat. What do they mean? So I thought, well, bugger you then, I'll start my own indie, and I did. Fool.
I wanted to make a difference in the way we make amazing TV programmes and the way we treat our production teams in the indie sector.
If it's a success, brilliant. If it's not a success, work harder, but it's on you. And so that's pretty much why we set up. And also, I would have carried on the rest of my life thinking, oh my God, if I'd have only just done that, what would have happened? So we did it.
A friend of mine who worked at the BBC came to me to ask advice for whether he should set up an indie. And one of the first things he said to me was, I'm completely risk averse. So the first thing I said back to him is, you're the last person in the world who should be setting up an indie.
So, Pat, have you gone for the sort of no one else would employ me route, which basically everyone seems to have given us a reason? I'm sure it's more subtle than that. What was your moment when you thought you'd been at the BBC, you'd had big jobs, you'd been in America, you thought, I want to do this sort of crazy thing and do my own thing?
Yeah, there were a few different things that came together. First of all, there's never been a better time to be a content producer in terms of rights ownership and the different places you can take your rights. Also, there are more buyers in the market, so you're subject to the opinions of fewer of the tastemakers. There's also never in this country been a black-led company of scale. And as you look around the world and you see Shonda and Oprah, and you just think, you know, why isn't there a UK black-led production company of any sort of scale that can sustain? And it was a combination of those three things that came together that led me, Narinder, Nav, Kwajo, Lucy to set up Sugar. And did it feel like a very brave, because there's a number of ways you could do that, right? Yeah. Including being within the beast of within the belly of a big beast, a big production. Going on your own, and initially without any, as I understand it, backing from anyone, was that sort of the bravest thing you'd done to that point? Did you feel particularly brave at that point? No, the bravest thing I did was probably leave the BBC, because I could have stayed there. Doesn't feel very brave to me. No, but I could have stayed there for years and years and years, and to give up regular income and a nice quality of life and all the rest of it, to take this part. That was probably the hard decision, is to leave the security of what you've got to step out and do something different. And Karen, so equally, you and I worked together for years, so you've been in big production groups, the Endemol's and Shines and so on, and you could absolutely, like Pat, have carried on being paid very nicely, regular income, forever. Yeah. But you decided you didn't want that, I guess. And again, was there a moment when you thought, I'm going to make this jump?
Yeah, it's about stepping stones. When David and Richard left the BBC to set up their indie, it was very much a kind of... That
was that fever, right?
Yeah, they were very much about, why are we making all this money for somebody else? And at the time, I thought it was a real kind of willy-waving thing to do.
There's no need to swear.
But it's been a staged process with me, and I felt I had enough knowledge, enough contacts, was in the right space to do it. I knew how to run a business, I knew how to sell, I thought people would buy from me, and I was ready for it. But I had to do it in the right circumstances, hence the Greenbird model, because I also think it's important to be really self-aware and know what you're good at and what you're not good at and what makes you want to remove your eyes with spoons, which include things like accountancy systems and computers and all of those important things. And I wanted to be involved with people who could help me grow my business, because I'd also spoken to a lot of friends who'd launched indies who said how incredibly lonely it is, because you launch an indie and you are the grown-up, and those moments when you are worried and you know, want to have a little cry in your office, you've got nobody there who can help you. As your
when did you last have a cry in your office, Gary?
Not so long ago, sooner than you think. I had a cry at Ben Frau, so did you.
It was very moving. But just on that point, because we're going to get into models and so on, but that sort of almost psychological, that moment, because is there a moment, and for people who are interested in doing it themselves, or is the moment where you go, I could definitely do this on my own, I can see myself doing this, I don't need to sort of make money for other people? Is that a moment of massive, overwhelming confidence and sort of blind faith, or is it more complex than that? You know, in other words, I suppose, did you think, I can definitely make this happen, or was it?
I thought, I'm prepared to give it a go, and I think I'd always get a job as an exec if it all goes tits up.
Yes, yes.
To be really honest, and I thought I would look back and feel regret if I hadn't had a go.
Yeah.
And also I genuinely wanted to be the only mad cow in charge of my destiny.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true, actually.
is liberating and
Yeah.
terrifying in equal measures.
Yes. So, Jazz, you started, I think, in 2004. Have I got that right?
2006, I set up, yeah.
Set up, and you went very sort of hardcore, which
Yeah.
is to say, well, two things. You came from journalism, so you weren't a TV person.
No.
And you, so that's one thing. And the second thing is you did it with your own money. You put your own money in. You were doing it from your bedroom. Yeah.
The good old-fashioned way. I remortgaged my life, remortgaged my flat, and I've been in telly. I was a journalist for 15 years for the likes of the Mirror and the Sun, and then moved into telly. Did it for 2 years. The terms of trade had just changed, 2003, and. It was a dream. I just thought, why not? I thought I'd give it a year. Made sure that I had lots of. I was on the fish finger diet for a year. Still am, sort of. And 10 years later.
So what?
Here we are. So there were three things for me. One was the terms of trade had changed, which means that producers suck eggs. Producers can own their own IP.
Yeah. So you
that
literally thought.
Became very attractive because.
Right. So you analysed that.
You've got to live.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be my own boss. And as a journalist, I was predominantly freelance. So motivation and discipline, weirdly, wasn't a problem. And if you own something and the timing's right and the plans align, you can sell it.
And do you? Because without, actually, again, we're talking about Ben Frere a lot, but there was a very inspiring, interesting session there. So let's get into the psychology of it. This thing about not having a boss. Do you think you and others, do you have a sort of authority issue? I mean, do you find it hard to have someone tell you, is that what you slightly have to be, do you think? Sort of, I want to do it my way and not compromise. Is that part of what the attraction is?
I think for me, it's also the fact that you have to have your own ideas and your own belief. And would I have got into telly as quickly? Probably not. Would I be an exec within 2-3 years? Even though I transferred script writing, practically 3,000 word features, which is a script, into television, probably not. So and for me, television was the bigger reward. I loved writing. I love writing. I love journalism. I love interviews. And it was observational. So for me, I sort of like realised that having that it's a longer game, but it was a much more exciting and fun way of making a living.
And
it was bigger. It felt bigger to me.
Got it. Kate, you've gone a slightly different route, which is to say you left the BBC having made lots of exciting drama, and again, a bit like some of the others, you could have done that for a long time.
I did do it for a long time, let's be fair. I was there 24 years, so I mean...
Yeah, that's actually genuinely a long time.
Quite a long time.
And then so you're now reviving a company that previously existed, Euston Films, under the Fremantle banner. So it's not a start-up in the sense that
I'm sorry, I'm a complete fraud. And I did point this out.
I did want to... That's basically what I'm driving at.
But, I was basically told to man up and get on the panel, and, there might be something I had to say, but
not by me.
A bit of a fraud.
But you're looking after a brand and you're running it in a way that's different from being a sort of staff exec or at BBC.
Fremantle. I was at the BBC for a very long time, and my boss was Pat actually at the end, and I was head of drama production in England, and it was a very, very full-on job, and I felt I'd got further, I think inevitably in these jobs, further and further away from the shows, and that's not to say I didn't feel an enormous sense of pride and ownership in them, but in the end, I was kind of enabling my really gifted team of execs to make the shows rather than getting my hands dirty. And I missed that. And, over the years, everyone at the BBC gets the sort of tempting offers come through. But Sarah Gator, who was then at Fremantle, connected me. And we really kind of connected on what I might do. Right. And Euston Films, other people were saying, come and take over X India or Y India. And I thought, oh, God, all that kind of, responsibility for those people's jobs that it's going to transfer one sort of responsibility to the same thing over there. So this was a label that everybody has enormous affection for in drama, and kind of slightly elder agents used to get quite misty-eyed about the shows, the deals they'd done with Euston Films. So it's really an extraordinary body of work, but it was it's long enough ago not to be too intimidating, but close enough to be quite inspirational. So I thought, well, that's great. I'd like to be Euston Films rather than, Kate Harwood Inc. And I'd like to start making shows again. I'd like to actually kind of bring
closer to it.
my instincts.
But why wouldn't you do, hearing something, why wouldn't you do the thing? You had a reputation, you clearly get work, you get commissions. Why wouldn't you go to the far end of this spectrum and say, I'm going to do it on my own, I'm going to be Kate Harwood Inc.?
Probably because I'm a big fat coward.
There you
probably.
go.
And I think probably also, actually, I thought, it's that weird thing where you take for granted the stuff you kind of feel that you can do, and the stuff that you, and really big up the stuff you can't as being an insuperable thing. And actually when you come out, you realise actually the stuff you can do, it's the clown playing Hamlet, you know, stop trying to play Hamlet, be the clown. And you kind of think, well actually I'm a drama producer, that's what I want to do. And I really wasn't sure that I would ever manage a business. I thought that would be like a nightmare. And it never really occurred to me that actually I could team up with people who could manage the business, and actually 90% of managing the business is creating a product that you can sell. So I think yes, of course you could have done it, but then you know, I wouldn't have made the leap as that. And also you know, I think having that brand as well meant a lot. It meant doors did open.
So let's think about the just touching on that broad the sort of notion of, are there too many startups and too many? So Pat, I mean, what about that question? And in a sort of human level, how often do you sit in your office and think, Jesus Christ, this is the hardest, this is a nightmare, and there's millions of people out there trying to sell stuff, and I'm at the back or wherever I am in the queue, and, oh God, I'm not sure I've quite got the will to do this. I mean, how often does that happen to you?
I never think I haven't got the will to do it, but I do sit there and think, Christ, this is really fucking hard.
Yeah.
It is one of the hardest things I've done.
You're getting a round of applause from the other room for that. Extraordinary. That's how much it's resonating.
It is one of the hardest things I've done. And it's partly because there are so many other sellers in the marketplace, but also the industry is itself in the middle of what for us is like the Industrial Revolution. You know, the business models are changing, the broadcasters are being squeezed, whether that's ITV's ad revenue or BBC's licence fee. Decisions are taking longer. When people said to me, it will take you a year to get your first commission, I sort of laughed. I thought, a year?
So how long did it take?
It took a year.
Yeah. And what's that about?
And it was for a single hour.
And what's that about that year? As in, because of course, technically, you could get commission in the first week, couldn't you, if you go in with the right idea? Is it about getting warmed up, getting the feel for the right ideas? Is it about how long broadcasters take?
It's about identifying who wants what. It's about recognising that actually the next 8-9 months is already commissioned anyway. It's about, certainly with the BBC, trying to wait to see what the licence fee settlement was going to be, so there was a hiatus there. In the world of drama, a series of musical chairs meant that Ben left, and then Steve November left, and everybody was in like this holding pattern, everybody on gardening leave.
And you don't, in a situation that you're all in, what you don't have is a number of shows already just chugging along, right, to protect you from that,
and
right?
Also somebody said something to me which at the time I thought was a pile of wank, frankly.
That is an extraordinary thing to say in front of this audience, Pat. I can apologise for what you've just heard.
But now I sort of understand it. Somebody said to me, after we've done our first 2 shows, somebody said to me, obviously I understand all of your individual backgrounds, but now I'm starting to understand what a Sugar Films film is. And I did think, that's total bullshit. But then you think about it when you're commissioning, and you've got an idea. I mean, a third of all commissions are probably commissioners phoning production companies saying, I want to do something in this space. And you pick that production company because they've got a particular skill. If I said I want to do something with a rig, everybody would say phone the garden. And until they've got you in their head, in terms of what they think you are in your NUCO, it's quite hard for them to make those calls to you, I think. And so I've sort of mollified my view on that a bit and sort of understand it a bit better, but it was just hard.
And Karen, how long did it take you to get your first...
Who's making these calls? I've never had one of those calls.
Well, asking you to...
Who's getting...
But how long did it take you to get your first show then?
How long did it take you?
Couple of months?
No, it was 6 months.
6 months,
yeah,
right.
and it is really hard going from running
What was
a
that
big
like when you got it? How did you actually get it?
It was a full-on conga around the office.
Yeah.
Because all you have to focus on is development, and every meeting that's postponed is another 2 weeks worth of heating you have to pay. And we also suffered from a massive knock-on that started with bloody Liam Keelan not going to Sky, changing his mind at the last minute, and everything in stasis, and then everything went weird at Sky, and we had some development money to produce a taster tape. 6 weeks later, nobody left in the department to give the tape. I always go like that, as though I actually had the tape in my hand, but we emailed it. And you're just thinking, oh my God, that's another 6 weeks of something that's not going to come to anything.
Do you think commissioning editors, channel controllers understand, the realities of what your business is, what cash flows? Should they understand? Does it matter? Or should they just be thinking, look, we're going to get this show right and we'll take as long as we take? Do you get a sense that they know what you're going through?
Well, it's never going to be sexy if someone feels sorry for you, is it? That's not how to play it.
Because maybe you just have to take what you got. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sometimes a sympathy shag is fine.
The other thing I'm taking out of Ben Frau this morning is I think I am the only indie leader born and bred in Middlesbrough. Yeah, you lot have no chance. Really, Stockton, all right, not bad. So no, it is really hard, and the kind of shows that I knew that people wanted to buy from me. It's another thing you have to.
Because you had a clear brand. It's clear what sort of show you would make. You might go into all sorts of areas. But so people knew what to expect. To Pat's point, people thought, I know what Karen Smith can do. Yeah. So that's an advantage, right?
It is, and you have to be absolutely aware of that and play to it. But those kind of shows don't come along every 5 minutes.
Yes.
There's a long lead into them, there are big amounts of money, and I had to create a business that felt instantly medium-sized, because no one's going to give a £6 million commission to someone working off their kitchen table. So there's all of that kind of thing at play. But
how did you do? When you say so what was that look? What did you do? Is that partly about the way you were funded? What was that?
And the team you put in place, and I didn't kind of get into the Greenbird model, but doing it alongside Jamie and Stuart meant that I had Stuart to help me create a robust business plan, and Jamie to help me exploit things commercially. And our second commission was a thing called Superstar Dogs for Jay at Channel 4, and all the way along in the whole process it was going to be 15 1-hours, and it's a studio show, and at the last minute she said, I want half hours but for half the money. Like, it doesn't work like that, because a studio show is all about the setup. I can then run on a load more of them, but it doesn't make it isn't any cheaper to do an hour than it is a half hour. But I needed the business. I wanted to get some IP out there, and Jamie was great. He helped me find funding and get a sponsor. We had to do all of this extra work on top of the development and the sale and the putting the team together in order to get the commission in the first place. And that's something that you can struggle with if you're small, because it's just you, and you have to do all of that as well as the hard bit, which is the creative in the first place, which is why that model was something that we created and has been invaluable for me, because you need that help. And
we are definitely going to go a bit more into all of your financial models, but yours was the simplest.
Mine was the bloody
in
hardest.
a way, because it was the kitchen table, and it was just you. You put your own money in. You actually remortgaged?
I remortgaged my flat.
Right.
I'd been in telly 2 years, and there weren't the models that exist now weren't in play. The Greenbirds weren't in play. The BBC Worldwides, which you know so well, Mr. Hinks, weren't in play.
It's good to be formal with me. I'm appreciating that.
The Channel 4, the Channel 4 sort of proportionally owning production companies. None of these models were in place, so it was sort of. I just there wasn't a massive business plan,
But how did you balance? So how did you?
I just wanted to give it. I wanted to give it a go. I believe in. I love stories. I love Italian stories. It's the creative versus the business. I guess I'd run myself as a business, as a journalist. So running a business, God knows what.
But how do you get that balance? And how do you that sort of creative business balance? So people are thinking, well, I like the idea of doing my own thing because I can make shows I believe in and so on. But there's a whole. Karen's already. There's the photocopiers. There's the the IT systems and all the rest of it. The cash. How did you did that all on your own at the beginning? But at some point, you've got to say, I need some help with this, right?
Yeah, I think you've sort of almost got to be, you've got to have a crazy amount of self-belief, which gets knocked all the time. We're in an industry where 95% of us are hearing no. You know, rejection's massive. 95% are saying no, depending on what side of the coin you're on. And I don't think I think we're in the business of being creative. That's our business, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. And I think that I think it would be easier for me to say, for you to ask me, was there a life-work balance?
Was there a life-work balance?
No, there was not. No. And is there still? I don't know. I think you've just got to.
But maybe you're like that anyway, right? Maybe that's just how you are. So why did you sell to Argonon? So you're doing this. It's in retrospect feels rather romantic. Kitchen tables, doing it yourself, struggling away. And then you decide to sell to a sort of I don't know, Argonon big, but a reasonably big player, and sell out, right? Suddenly, hang on a minute, for this incredible driven, I'm running my own thing. You've decided to take the shilling. What was that about? I
think sell out is not really the way to say it. I think it's growing and growing into something bigger and expanding. And it got to the point for us where we had a few commissions and we were getting to that. It took us 1.5 years to get our first commission, and I wasn't Pat Young, you know, and it was a one-off, and it was Angus, lovely Angus McQueen at the time, who was at Channel 4, and he took a punt, and you know, and it was as simple as that. They took a punt, and so.
But would you? But when you're, I mean, I remember sort of Endemol when we were buying companies, you'd have these conversations where people quite rightly say, "It's all about scale. We want to grow. We need to go to the next platform." And then you say, "Well, we could pay this." They say, "Well, I'm not doing it for that." No. And actually, ultimately, quite rightly, there's a moment when people might say, "I need to sort of cash in on my hard work." Was it? I mean, there's no shame in that, right? Is that partly what you did? You thought, "God, this is hard work. I need a bit of help here," and frankly, a bit of cash.
Yeah, right? It was expand or die. It really was. It was expand or disband.
Right.
Because the model that we had was great. We'd get a couple of one-offs. We'd just got our first series, trying to make that into a returning series. The infrastructure became difficult because we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the resources to have that infrastructure. And weirdly, it was one of those serendipity moments where we were just chatting with our black manager, trying to get a loan, and he suggested us meeting a couple of potentially interested people, and Argonon were one of them, and it was immediately for me. I mean, it took a year to get the right deal, but immediately for me, I could see that this was the only way to
survive and grow
and to carry on doing what I love.
So let's just explore a bit the sort of models out there. So let's go to the simplest. You're in Fremantle. So I suppose one of the questions is, and you've got a brand, you've got a company that you're growing, but you're within Fremantle, a big producer. I mean, I suppose the question there is, you can understand why that's an interesting thing to do. You're in a big company, Fremantle, incredible company, and all the rest of it. But I suppose you're trading a bit the freedom and the potential financial rewards if you put it off, right?
But they're not a drama company in the UK, and they had a drama history, but Euston Films was gathering dust as a label. And I felt that I would be, I mean, literally, Nimi, who's our creative director, and I, we used to say sometimes we're plucky little Euston Films out there battling away, and sometimes when you want to show a bit of muscle, we're like, well, we're Fremantle Media. But I was given, partly because there were no other drama, labels around, I was given a tremendous amount of freedom. Nobody was telling me what to develop. They assumed I'd know what I wanted to develop. Nobody was sort of steering me to markets. When I said I want to get on a plane and go to New Zealand and sit down and talk to Neil about the show, it was off you go. And I said I want to go to LA and pitch another show and find some co-production, off you go. There was no, I was assumed that if I was going to take a big chance on something, I knew what I was doing. But they were also very ambitious for scripted. So, they got a big scripted, entity in the US, made American Gods. So there are other scripted companies all over Fremantle, all over the world, and actually the kind of great cheerleader Sarah Dool used to kind of get us all together a couple of times a year, and that's been a really, so you feel kind of alone together,
But if you, as undoubtedly you will, make a success of it re-emerges, becomes a globally recognised brand, it'll be incredibly satisfying, no question about that. but you would have made a lot of money for Fremantle, not very much for yourself, and in a way that some of these guys... do you think about that, or is that sort of not the point?
Well, no, yeah, I did think about that. I didn't think about it at the time, because guess what? You know, they did pay better than the BBC. Guess what that?
No.
So, yeah, shocking though, maybe. But
Unfortunately, you weren't a man.
No, that's true. That's
would have
true.
been,
Yeah, let's
you would have been okay.
go there.
Yeah. We're into all the issues today, ladies and gentlemen.
Tick. That's my boss, did I mention that? Actually, you know, the thing is, I think, you know, let's see where we go, and let's see where Fremantle want us to go. And, you know, it's very difficult with drama. It is quite interesting, isn't it? Because the lead time is so slow. And although we got script commissions, you know, in a couple of months, we did get a programme commission in a year, Neil Cross's Hard Sun. Well, I started up Euston Films in September 14, and Hard Sun is going to be delivering into the BBC this autumn. So that's 3 years,
No,
and that is to get it on screen, and that's just what it takes. So walking away from that and going somewhere else and doing it, it's so difficult because the drama and everything, you get so immersed in those lead times and those projects, and particularly, of course, in the modern way with the writers. So, I mean, God, I mean, I feel really lucky and really excited about it, and I just think, you know, I'm having a ball. And my dad said to me the other day, it's like, oh, well, anyway, never mind what my dad said, but the point
No, we need to know what your dad said. I'm thinking he doesn't sound as supportive as you'd want him to be.
No, he is. He was like,
let's just let
no, he really, really was. But I said, you have to understand, I'm really lucky because I have a skill in a boom time for an industry. You know, I'm so lucky. 10 years ago, when we thought reality was going to sweep scripted into the dusty back room, you know, maybe I would have dwindled away doing, you know, what Jane Trant and I always used to joke about, running the archive in Radio Truro. No disrespect to Radio Truro.
No, let's
you know, that was always the kind of, you know, happy end point. You know. But, you know, so then now, lucky us, you know, drama and scripted, and English language drama and scripted, and partnerships in drama. I'm doing developing a really big show with our Italian sister company, and you know, it's so exciting because you can go out and they go, it's dual language, and everybody goes, oh right, great, whatever. You know, I mean, it's such a thrilling world.
No, absolutely, and again, sorry about your relationship with your dad. Pat, let's go into funding. So you basically have taken money from Sky. We all know there's a lot of money out there, and people may be looking at this themselves. So there's a lot of money out there. People are searching for content. They want to back people. You went for Sky after a year or so. Can you tell as much as you can, but in not very long period of time?
Indeed, yeah.
How does that deal work? What's that do for you, and what does it look like?
So, yeah, it's a process. You kiss lots of frogs, and hopefully you find a prince, and we found one with Sky. They're a minority investor. We still own the majority of the company. We have a distribution arrangement, but it's not exclusive. They give us a lot of market intelligence, and that's especially useful in areas of factory where you can be going down a blind alley where they can tell you that 15 other people are ahead of you on this. And in the world, I mean, sugar isn't just non-scripted, it's also scripted.
So do they have distribution? Sorry, maybe you said, do they have distribution, Sky? Because
Sky Vision has distribution, but we are free to go with the best people for the project, so we're not tied to Sky.
But their approach was, well, we'll invest in you and effectively cash flow you based on a business plan you put forward, and we have a first look.
There's a separate distribution agreement, but it's not exclusive.
Okay.
Because Sky can also get benefit from us as a shareholder.
And what does that basically do for you? I mean, it does the obvious, right? It basically means you can pay the electricity bills. You can pay for
the bills. It means we can get a development team of talented people that are known in the industry that can help drive the business forward. It means, certainly in the world of scripted, we can fund scripts. You know, in the old model, broadcast would fund your script and you'd work at the broadcaster's pace, but anybody who's dealt with the OTTs will know that they expect you to turn up with the script, the writer, the Bible. Trips to America, you know, you start doing lots of trips to America, like that soon racks up on the expense line. So they've enabled us to move with a degree of pace to try and, I mean, we have a similar model to yours, you know, in that we're trying to get to scale very quickly.
Well, not too quickly.
Well, I know you've said
4 or 5 years.
yeah.
10 years.
the plan is to get us to scale with a degree of speed, because I think it's very hard to survive in this marketplace.
And would you reckon, you obviously feel that a strategic investor, which is to say Sky in this instance, rather than say money from private equity or finance, that's the way to get, that's what felt right to you, it felt like a benefit.
Absolutely, not just in terms of industry contacts, but actually we got on with them really well. There was a connection, which we didn't feel with some of the other investors. Offered us more money, but you sort of knew you were going to be working for the man, and it was going to be some form of inverted slavery. Which
You're definitely not working for the man with Sky, Pat. You've chosen a very benign little.
It actually, I mean, it actually is quite benign at the moment.
No, sure.
I mean,
no, but that's important, right? The relationship.
The relationship is key
because you have options.
Yeah.
Presumably, there are other people who were.
There were other people that were interested, and for us, the relationship was key. It came down to the relationship.
And Karen, we've toyed with trying to explain the Greenbird model. I'm not suggesting you give it a go. I know, I think most people are familiar with it. You knew Jamie anyway at Greenbird because you've been at Shine together. And that, again, they took a minority stake in Tuesday Shine. And so that allows you to have the business and commercial backing and a lot of that stuff taken care of. So you can sort of get on and run the career. Would that be a fair?
Yeah.
And that felt important to you to do that.
Yeah, and this being instantly middle-sized with all of that support and emotional support as well. The thing I was talking about earlier about it being a very lonely thing to do. It's still very lonely, and actually the guys quite often when they're talking to new people with setups, quite encourage them to do it in a twosome because of
so it's you and Jamie.
No, I did it on my own, but but I have got Steph alongside me who's brilliant. But because it is really, it's tough and it's hard and it's personal. And I was saying earlier that when we got You Back in the Room commissioned, which was brilliant in original IP at ITV, I phoned Jim Allen at RDF for a reference with somebody. He's like, fucking hell, Karen, I can't believe you got an original commission away at ITV, that's awesome. And any one of us is only 6 months away from going out of business. And that was somebody the scale of RDF, and we all have that hanging over us.
So how close have you been to running out of money?
Very close on several occasions.
Like days?
No, not quite days. That would be a bit irresponsible. But cash flow is always an issue, and then last minute changes of commissioners leaving, or deciding to half the length of the show and having to put something together to piece it together. So no, it's never been that tight, but it is constantly hard work. I'm just at a stage now. It's 5 years next week where I'm starting to think about stage 2, and that is. It's can I afford to hire in an exec? Because up until now,
it's a very interesting area.
It's me.
Yeah.
I exec everything.
Because if you've got someone, or you've got a group, a Greenbird in your case, Sky and Pat, taking care of, if you like, sort of cash flow and commercial and business and so on. The thing about all of you, and definitely you, Karen, because I know you well, is you represent, people feel very safe with you taking on a big entertainment show, right? They know you're going to deliver it. So is your conundrum the sort of, that's what gets you the business, but at some point you've got to be saying to them, it's not just me, it's my company, and I need you to trust this person and that person so that I can expand, right? Does that feel like a difficult thing to pull off?
Yeah, it was something I eventually achieved at Shine, so I've done it before, but it is even more personal when it's Tuesday's Child. But it's more about, can I afford that person? Can I take them on and afford that line? How often do you put a full exec line in a budget? And if it is another person, then that's a real wage that you have to cover. It's basic decisions like that.
It's so interesting.
And I think it's actually a problem, potentially, for the next stage of execs coming through, that we're kind of bunging things up a bit. Because we're running indies, we're execing the things ourselves, and we can't afford to bring on the next generation of execs, so that actually might be a problem in the future.
But you could afford it, for example, if you said, I'm going to give away more of my company, right? Again, it doesn't matter what your deal is or isn't with Greenbird, but just the general principle. You could give away more of your company. You have a minority investor, but you could go the full-on free man, route, or you could give sort of 50% away and get more cash, right? But that's not something you want to do, right? Because you want to hold on to more of the equity, or
I mean, I know you don't want to talk about you, but I look at your model.
I think the audience have got
honestly, no, but I genuinely think, my God, your wage bill must be massive. And the pressure on you guys to get some commissions and get some production must weigh really heavily, because the emotional drive every single day, week and month is paying the wages and looking out at that team and making sure that they're well looked after and feeling that responsibility. So increasing that is quite terrifying. And the key thing for me now is, and so the thing that is key for me, and also the thing that terrifies me, is I need some returners. I need to be able to start the financial year knowing that I have these things. The thought of nothing coming back and starting another year with a completely blank sheet of paper and having to get back up to 5 million again is terrifying. And I noticed that there's quite a few of us who started indies at the same time, and I had lunch with somebody recently, and he feels exactly the same. It's returners are this next stage. It's the thing that you need. So Lego did well last night.
Yeah,
that's coming back. But yeah, that's the kind of the next generation. That's what we need. We need returning formats. Because, sorry, the other thing that is my other bugbear is with our kind of shows is how channels are now expecting us to bring finance in order to make the show in the first place, which is quite often a large distribution advance. Now, that distribution advance then goes into making the series. The chances of me ever recouping or ever getting any money from that are practically impossible. So by doing that, the channel has cut off another potential revenue stream. But it's happening more and more, and the people it's hardest for are the indies.
But what's interesting about all of you, I think, is that just your statement then about about financing and whether you're going to get a return is that you talk a creative game, but you also talk, as it were, like business people, right? You're talking about what the costs are. So I mean, sorry, this is an obvious thing, but there does seem to me, doesn't there, to be this sort of slight myth in the industry that there's a sort of business here and creative here, and they're very separate people. And you all encompass both because you have to. So I guess, again, it comes to the point of why do you need people, why do you need Argonon, right? You're happy to sell, but do you really need that sort of business support? Do you really need that to scale? Or is it what you actually need is some cash from, say, there's plenty of private equity out there or finance houses who are willing to put money in? What is it that you need from these strategic buyers? Well,
I mean, I think that was the best opportunity as well. And like Pat said, our relationship, we clicked, so we were looking at other models.
But do you mean they paid the most? Genuinely?
No, honestly, no.
They weren't the highest, they weren't the ones willing to put the most money in?
I couldn't possibly say. But it fitted in, it ticked a lot of boxes. It fitted in lots of ways and got on really well with James and saw the vision, and it was really exciting to be part of something bigger but still run absolutely autonomously and independently. So I've got shares in Argonon, which is very grown up, and there's a board and everything. I eat crisps on it a lot, and it's sort of very. It felt the right fit for transparent, where I wanted to go, where I was completely still independent. They all run on federal structures, the super indies predominantly anyway. And cash is king though, cash is king, and cash flow is king. And it was just the best, it was the most attractive and felt the right thing to do, felt the right deal to do. Did I need it? I could have probably carried on. We could have carried on growing. Felt the right time. And with that model of having a commission, and because you have to be a triple threat, you've got to be able to create it, you've got to be able to exec it, you've got to be able to deliver it. That in itself it could actually work against you, because while you're doing that, you're not developing, you're not building the business, and so you could be making a program for 6 months, or a documentary. A Very British Brothel took me a year to get the access, and then a year to make it.
I read in the notes. It's always funny when you read. It's funny when you read briefing notes, because they and there was very good briefing notes, by the way. But it said that you were, just it tickled me. It said you were on the bus on the way into work, and you noticed there were a lot of brothels.
Brothels, yeah.
And I wonder, what does a brothel look like from a bus? Are they obvious?
Right, it's sort of like also probably sort of...
I've crossed a line.
and it's the human condition, and telling stories about the human condition, formatting the human condition in all of its various forms is what excites me and is what I'll always want to do. And a brothel is a part of that.
Now, I noticed that we've got sort of 10 minutes left, and we may do some questions, but before we do that, I wouldn't mind doing a quick sort of run through, and the question would be, what would you do differently? I mean, some of you are all at different stages, some earlier than others, but what are the lessons you've learned? What would you do differently? So we're going to go like this for some reason. I've decided that sort of feels pleasing. Starting with you, Pat.
I think digital is a much bigger picture of the factual sort of business going forward than maybe we imagined it, but not in the traditional sense and not even in the branding content sense. I think there is a rethinking of digital that needs to happen, and there's a lot of opportunity there. We could get it right.
And you wish you'd sort of grasped that bit earlier? I wish I'd grasped that earlier, yeah. So sort of an area of business that you felt you probably...
Think about it. I mean, the factual model, you get your 10% production fee. You know, if you're doing a documentary for BBC Three, it's 130 grand, you make 13 grand. You know, how much cost does that really cover over the course of a year? So I just think the digital space is expanding, not just expanding. People are doing it differently there, and we just need to catch up and change the mindset. There are too many people fishing in one pond.
And Kate, I'm fixated on this idea that you're going to grow a very successful company, but not get very rich in the process. I don't know why I'm fixated on that.
Maybe
is that one thing? Is that you know what? Your dad is in the audience tonight. You didn't know that, so it's a really emotional moment. What would you?
He really doesn't say that. He's amazed I'm still earning anything. That's the point.
He's a really interesting, complex guy, isn't he? And this relationship does need exploring. At Edinburgh next year. What would you? I suppose the key for you is would what you've done differently is sort of done it more on your own. Do you think about that, or?
It doesn't obsess me because God knows, it's exciting and involving enough. If I could sort of jump on the roundabout and go round again in the same time scale, I probably would go out and do it on my own. But I'm really happy where I am because I feel autonomous. I don't feel kind of as plugged into the corporate as I think people might imagine. I am, and I'm supported by it. But I think it's also. What I would do creatively is I think I'd understand that, you can think like a kind of taste leader rather than just a taste follower. And, and actually every time we try to jump on a little bit ahead, it always pays off, rather than sort of jump on and catch up, So I think it's sort of, but we have moved fast. We've moved, and we've got Euston North as well now, which is with Hilary Martin and Simon Judd, and based out of Salford, and it sort of feels as though we are growing in our way, and it's always driven by ideas and driven by drama.
Great. Jazz, what would you do differently? Do you think?
Differently, piece of advice. Let me think.
It's not a surprise question, this, Jazz. We've been doing too. It seems like I've caught you unawares, but.
I think being fearless is key. I don't think I would have done it differently. I think I would have been interested in some of the models around now.
The financing models.
Yeah, the financing models that are around now that weren't around. But I needed to do it that way.
No,
it was right for me. I needed to do it that way.
Karen, is there anything you would do differently?
You know me, I'm always right.
You are annoyingly always right.
No. Actually, it's been brilliant. I've genuinely loved it, and I'm incredibly proud of what we do, and the team we've been able to build, and the values, and it's actually when the team said it, and they described people as "you're a Tuesday's child," which actually made me really proud that they've got this kind of sense of identity, and we've created
and a bit
something
sinister,
together.
to be fair.
And a bit sinister, but graceful.
But it's so interesting hearing you speak, and you've all sort of said this, which is it's a very TV discussion, this, isn't it? In the sense that we've talked about how hard it is, how difficult. Jesus Christ, it's lonely, and so on. And then you end by saying we wouldn't do anything else. I mean, it's brilliant. You feel proud of it. It matters. It's personal. Wonderful.
And what we do is brilliant, and it's exciting, and we're able to do that. But nobody should assume for one second that it's a piece of piss, because it isn't.
I don't think this audience will be under the illusion after today's uplifting session. Right, we'd love to have any questions if anyone would like to ask one. There's someone at the back, so we've got a couple. So I don't know if there's the mic coming for you, so yeah.
Hi there. I'm in a startup phase myself, and I wondered what your thoughts were on going into a co-production partnership in the early days to try and ideally speed up the first commission, versus sort of sticking out entirely on your own and probably taking a lot longer to get the first commission away. And by co-production partnership, I mean obviously partnering up with a much bigger, more established indie.
In scripted, non-scripted?
Not non-scripted.
Who would anyone like to take that?
I think it can make sense if the deal's right, but a lot of small indies come to us with deals where they've frankly been shafted by the bigger indie. And I think you've got to fight for the right deal. There are companies out there that will do good deals, so don't go with the first deal. I'd say kiss lots of frogs and find the best deal for you.
I would add to that. I would say if you've got a commissioner already interested, I would try and convince them to do it yourself. I worked in a bar for the first year practically, like sort of every night. Do it yourself, own it, and deliver it, and then you start delivering as you. Unless it's a massive sort of like, sort of Tim Hinks type format, in which case you could co-pro and make sure you get 50-50.
I'll do 60-40. There's a question there. Oh, God, it's you, Chris Curtis on broadcast again. He keeps his head down, puts his hands up, and then you suddenly, guys, go easy here. Watch out.
Not at all. I just wanted to very quickly clarify. I mean, broadcast has immense respect for anyone that starts up their own company, and lots of admiration for what you do. And there's no sense that we don't think that there's room in the market for new businesses. I just think what's really interesting is the acceleration at the rate at which startups have begun in the last 3 to 5 years, I would say, and that's become the key route. It's to do with consolidation. It's to do with established companies being bought up, and super indies looking to find a new way, umbrellaing, that kind of thing. I think it's interesting that there are lots of new buyers, as Pat points out. A lot of those new buyers are probably only accessible to a quite small percentage of the production community, and indies spend a lot of time telling me how cutthroat competitive it is out there. And so there is a situation, I think, where lots and lots of companies starting up, cutthroat competition. There's not to say everything can't be sustainable, but I'm just interested in whether the panel believe that the UK market is in a position to support the vast number of companies that are out there.
Pat, what is your take on that?
I don't know how many companies are out there. It is cutthroat. It is really tough. We're always looking at cash flow and can we pay the wage bill next 3 months, 6 months. I think companies will fall by the wayside. It's inevitable that some will fall by the wayside. But the market isn't just the UK anymore. The market is different, and I think part of navigating the future is being quite agile in terms of business model. In terms of where the money's coming from. I mean, our biggest commission to date is from a not-for-profit in the United States. And, it's a good commission, it's the sort of stuff we want to do, but it's not in the space where everybody else is fighting. So, but I think you've got to be much more open-minded about how you pull deals together, who you partner with, how much is enough for you and how much you can share. It's going to take a different mindset if you're going to be successful.
And Karen, are you when you see, because Chris is right, every week someone's starting.
I've heard of two. Since I've been here, 2 new ones.
During this session?
Yeah.
That's how powerful your argument has been. But does it surprise you? Do you think, God, good luck to them, and do you think it's inevitable, as Chris is suggesting, and absolutely take that point, Chris, that you're not, you're just posing a question, but the numbers of them are going to fall by the wayside, and we'll look back and think, that was a funny 2 or 3 years when everyone's sort of set up, but now they're back doing, in big indies and super indies and all that.
I mean, there's so many different models, so setting up an indie is different from being umbrellaed by something bigger, which a lot of people are doing. So some things have more of a safety net, and that suits them because they get the wage, but they get some share of the IP. I do worry about people who are more junior when they set up, about what their commissioning relationships are and how they're perceived. And I did a session about breaking into America, and everyone was kind of like looking at you and how to do it, and the way to break into America is have a hit and have a reputation. There really isn't any other way to do it, but they were,
really short
that was
time,
the holy
but
grail.
in a funny way, I think Chris's point is partly, when I look at it, it is about that sort of level of people who maybe haven't got the reputations that you have all got and starting up. And does that feel, do that strata of people, why, once upon a time they would be working their way up through Endemol or the BBC, would they? And now they're jumping out there and doing, and are they mad?
Well, they are, but then I went to a session with those vloggers who've actually created a business and made it work from the age of 25 with no experience, just because they had the chutzpah and they knew their audience. So who am I to say how a business would work? But in a traditional model, I think it would be very hard if you don't have a reputation.
I think there was a question down here, and I think we're going to have to end it. I'm really sorry, because we're out of time, aren't we? So we have to be quick. So.
I was just going to say quickly, I think it's a good idea to set up an indie when you've got the commission already, whichever way you do that.
That's jazz.
And also to kind of focus on the international revenue. That's the key to making the whole thing succeed, because no business can run on a 10% profit margin. So I think, and collaborating with other indies, you know, is really important, so that you can answer all the questions that any commissioner might ask.
Yeah, thank you. That's a statement, not a question. So we're actually going to have a final question. Connor, you put your hand up. Let's make it snappy, Connor. And,
What is an indie of scale, Pat, and you, Tim?
Good, that's a very quick
because
question
actually, at what point do you get to big enough that you've got, I don't know how much investment you guys are putting in, but you're interestingly sort of new models, scale up quickly through organic growth? Question. It's not been done like that. You've had all three medias where they grew by acquisition. But you're saying we're going to become an indie of scale quickly. What does that look like?
Pat?
It's 2 to 3 years minimum, and I think, to pick up Karen's point, it's about having return. It's about having a bedrock of stuff that you can rely on, then you can go the extra mile. At the moment, we're doing singles. I'm hopeful that we're going to get our first couple of short series commissioned very soon, but then you want to get into the long running and returnable stuff on which you can then bedrock your business and start. Like Karen, you look at year 2 in the business plan and it's all new titles. That's sort of exhilarating and petrifying all at the same time. To me, scale is when you've got that covered, and then you can start being really, really ambitious in terms of your reach. And I don't know what the number. There isn't.
How many people have you got working for you, Pat?
Across scripted and non-scripted, we've probably got 10 to 12 people, not on productions.
Okay. And Tim, how many people have you got working for you?
I love them all. I would say that it's partly what's been interesting about this is who are you doing it for, and what, if you like, what does success look like? Because I think, on the one hand, the hardest job in this whole industry is, I would say, running a global super indie and trying to grow, right? That's the hardest job. These jobs are incredibly hard and challenging, but if you get the deal right and you have patience and you have a shareholder investor who's actually got a long view, and you're not trapped in an earn-out or where you've got to hit this year and this year, what you're actually trying to do is ultimately grow a sustainable business over a certain amount of time. Then in a way, what matters is whether you're making shows this sounds rather, but making shows you're proud of and making shows that return. If you've got the time and the space to do that, sort of the only person that cares about how profitable you are once you've broken even is you and your team, right? It's up to you how profitable you are. You might be more profitable one year, more profitable left. You just got to make it work. So I think it's I think what everyone said loud and clear, it's all about the deal and getting a deal that's rational and reasonable for your company, right?
And suits you. Because the thing about having an equity partner who wasn't in television terrified me, because they really wouldn't understand that you had all of this plan and then Jay Hunt resigned and the impact that had on it. They wouldn't compete with them if they make widgets or whatever they make.
It's also not growing too fast, I think, as well. I mean, we're
still
our little core is still me, and Nimi and a development assistant. And and Euston North are keeping their little, you know what I mean? And it's sort of because, as you say, that thing about whether to hire an exec, you know, we're getting to that stage if we have 2 productions next year and they're going to clash, do we hire an exec? And you just, if you get too big, then, you know, there's a lot of mouths to feed if the shows aren't flowing right. So, and you're also losing kind of that connection.
I think we'll have to wrap up, and so we leave on the bombshell that some will work, some won't,
and it's hard.
But it's hard. But it's more fun than anything not involving drugs, and in some cases involving drugs. We've heard some of the stories. It's a wonderful thing to be doing, and I really appreciate your time and to the panel. So to Pat Young, everyone's going to get their own individual applause because of how hard they're working out there. Pat Young, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at Kate Harwood, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Jazz Gowans, and we've got Karen Smith. I've turned into Richard Bacon. And we want to thank our sponsors, CPL Partnership, for paying me an undisclosed sum for doing this. So thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.